Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now, if we could just take a moment of reflection. Thank you all. All right, statement by the chair is the purpose of the procedure of the workshop. All right. In a mission statement, we're here to ensure the strongest educational outcomes for our students, families, and stakeholders while being fiscally responsible to the Little Compton taxpayer. Mr. McNamee, have we met that criteria? Take it away.
Well, absolutely, but we're going to have the superintendent lead off.
Okay.
Your remarks on the budget.
Just a few.
Madam Superintendent.
Please.
Thank you very much. The FY 2024 budget contains no surprises. Approximately 90% of the budget represents fixed costs, which include salaries and the tuition hike for our Portsmouth High School and CTE students. We have students at Tiverton High School, Newport Area Career and Technical Education Center. There are some new costs that are integrated as well, especially related to future-proofing our school and facility. We're also looking to braid additional monies to existing reserves for capital improvements in order to actuate the long-range capital improvement plan funded by a former $50,000 grant. We've got big plans, once again, for this little school. And those plans will start coming to fruition in terms of the capital improvement processes that we're working on now. We're working on schematics and so forth at the end of the spring and beginning of the summer. So I have to say, like, most communities of Wilbur McMahon students, mostly preschool, pre-K, and our primary grade kiddos did not receive the kind of in-person educational experiences that would result in enduring foundational knowledge. And the learning loss that those 18 months to 2 years caused will affect our students for years to come. We're very lucky to live in a town like Little Compton, where the effects of the pandemic on students, effects that have been well documented and researched locally, statewide, regionally, nationally, and internationally. We're just so lucky to be in this community that affords our school administration and staff ready access to ample resources that serve our school quite well, especially in this time of remediation and mitigating the effects of a couple of years of schooling that was not optimal for all kids. Our optimal class sizes, on the other hand, are definitely a boon when it comes to bringing our students up to grade level learning standards in light of the challenges that they have all faced academically, social, emotionally during this pandemic. We also have new initiatives and some that are sort of midstream, including our International Baccalaureate pathway that we will be wrapping up soon. It's a prestigious designation, but it comes with a lot of hard work, hundreds of hours of effort on the part of our coordinator, Amy Lotz, principal Jack McKinnon, and all of the staff and families. Families have been attending the town hall meetings that Principal McKinnon and Ms. Lotz have been offering. So that designation will certainly give us a distinction unlike no other. And it syncs beautifully with our wonderful village school. Regarding YCAS, we are definitely doing very well in that regard. State tests are just one data point, but we do need objective measures so that we know that we are teaching the learning standards to all students, and our proficiency levels are not only rising with sometimes a little blip here and there, but if you look where we stand relative to the rest of the state, about 56 schools and about 66 LEAs, standalone schools and also districts. We are number 4 in the state in terms of English language arts proficiency, and we are number 7 in the state in mathematics. Our grade 8 scientists landed in the top 10 for the next generation science assessment. Incredibly rigorous, the most rigorous summative science assessment in the history of the state. And if we look at our grade level kudos, we have, out of the entire state, number 1 in ELA and math. Our grade 4 students have the highest proficiency rate in the state in ELA and in math. Our grade 3 math students from last year have the highest proficiency rate in the state. Our grade 3 ELA students from last year, MyCast 2022, are number 2 in the state, and it goes on and on. Grade 6 is number 2 in the state for all districts in ELA and math as well. We have impressive results. And we all know in a small school with small numbers, we're at the mercy of small changes either way. And this is a testament to this community and its support, and to administration. And of course, I always have to give kudos to our technology department and our teachers, assistants, and specialists. I've worked in other districts, and this staff is second to none. And I just want to thank the community again for their support. The next slide, Jonathan, if you will. I know it's small text there, but I wanted to put everything that I could in there. This community affords us ample resources, as I said, for optimal staffing and also programming. Our SEL programming continues to grow and evolve. Our academic supports continue to grow and evolve. There are some, we just don't have the room to put them up there. I will have a much more inclusive list when it comes to the town financial meeting mailer. I always save the best for last. And once again, I'm going to thank the town in advance for support of this budget. And Mr. McNamee and I will be available for the next several weeks to answer any and all questions, concerns, etc., regarding this draft budget. It's student-centric, as our budgets have been my 5 years here. And I really think we've worked hard at bringing it to a point that meets the needs of our students, affords us the resources, human and material, that we need to continue with the kind of academic achievement and social emotional support programs that are in place. And over the mic to our money guy, CPA extraordinaire, Rhode Island Business Manager of the Year,
Yes.
2023, this year. Take it away, Mr. McNamee, as usual.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. So in this year's budget, there were 3 challenges. One that we expected, which was the increase in the tuition for Portsmouth High School, where we went from the 1-year renewal contract at $13,500 to $15,000. Some of that was we were able to mitigate with some reductions in overall enrollment at the Portsmouth High School. So what we initially, when we were going through the contract, we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of north of 150, had about a $62,000 impact on this year's budget. So that was a positive. 2 unexpected challenges. One was the reduction in state aid. When the state aid formula came out, it gave us a reduction in our state aid of about $85,000. So that was pretty substantial, almost a 20% decrease in state aid. Whether the legislature does anything about that or not, what had happened was back in 20 during the pandemic and subsequent years in 21 and 22, they tried to keep everybody whole. So when they were funding the formula, they knew there was some reductions in enrollment. Some of it was homeschooling. But in reality, there was also some declines in overall enrollment. When you looked at, even when we were looking at Portsmouth High School, we looked at Portsmouth, Middletown, and Tiverton, all had significant declines in enrollment. So statewide, I think it was, I think over 7,000 students. In Lincoln, we were kind of break even. Our enrollment has been increasing over the years, but even with that break even enrollment, we wound up losing a couple of $100,000 in state aid. So there are probably maybe 10 or 12 districts that lost. Some districts like Barrington, which I can't figure out, and get $1.8 million or $1.9 million of additional aid. So I think something needs to be done with the formula. And when you look at, maintenance of effort, where Pride is saying that, towns have to fund at the same level as they did the year before, you would think that the state would be doing that same thing. But that's not happening. I've got a conference on Monday with people from RIDE to talk about the funding formula and what happened this year too. So I'll be able to report back a little bit more on that. But that certainly was a surprise from a budgetary standpoint. And just recently, the Newport County Regional Special Education Program, that potential dissolution caused some issues, which in our case may have a little bit more of a positive impact on the budget. And we'll go through that as we go through this process. So I think Susan's here too, so we can.
Don't be.
Wait to add her settlement.
Don't be at all.
Sorry, how are you? Good.
Welcome.
Sorry.
Don't be, please. We're here, you didn't miss anything. We did miss the opening act, which total cameo appearance. Very well done. Now it's on to Mr. McNamee.
She'd love to repeat it, but
No, she'll have other chances for her to.
That's fine.
so those are the three things. So Portsmouth High School tuition, state aid reduction, and the Newport County Regional Special Education dissolution. And I'll go through the impacts that they had on the budget as well. So we start off with the enrollment, and that actually is at, it's 218. So they did change it on the slide. See Portsmouth High School 76. We had initially budgeted that, I believe, at 11. So we had that at 87 in the budget for 23. So we did have some favorable impact on that in the current year. We expected that high school budget, if everybody from the 8th grade goes into the high school, we'll bump that up. We have 20 graduating. We have 26 coming in from the 8th grade. So we'll see an increase of 6 to 82. And I also looked at 25 where that would be, and we add another 2. So we go up to 84. So we're not seeing a big increase that's really going to impact the budget, even though we'll see some increases in the tuition too. So, and that gives you the history. So here we have it by grade level, the 218. That first one is pre-K and those students that are getting speech and language here at the school. So we are seeing a little bit of an increase in the overall enrollment compared to last year. And that could favorably impact what we would be seeing from state aid, although our state aid as a percentage of our total, just to give you an example, we've got a see, we got an $8 million budget here. In Lincoln, I've got a $70 million budget. I get about 17 million in state aid. Here we get 400 and, well, now we'll get 370 some odd, 361 on an $8 million budget. So a lot of that has to do with community wealth and the contribution of the community to the funding formula. And that goes to the valuation of the property as well.
The Barrington portion of that book must be, the Barrington portion of that book must be lost somewhere.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure what happened with Barrington. There could have been increases in enrollment there. Clearly, it's a wealthy community. East Greenwich, I believe, had a little bit of a reduction in state aid, but Barrington just stood out in terms of their increase this year. And the other thing is there was like 56 million in the state budget for education formula funding. Of that 56 million, 22 of that went to charter schools. So not all of that
I'm sorry.
at the public education. And that's a whole nother issue. Certainly the governor was a big proponent of charter schools. Cumberland, where he came from, has a very high number of kids going to charter schools. So hopefully legislators will make some changes and we may see some impact on that, but hopefully the enrollment will help us a little bit. So here, as I mentioned, you got grade 12 and 23 is 20 kids. We'll see 26 coming in. You look at this year, we had 13 kids in grade 9. 3 or 4 years from now, when those kids are leaving at 13, if we get 26 in, we see an increase of 13 kids.
Mhm.
That's going to be a sizable hit. So, we have to kind of look at that number as we move forward, because that'll have a significant impact on the budget. So here's the bad news on the state aid. We were at 448,877. In fact, last year, I think we budgeted 432. And when the aid actually came in, we had 448. So we had a little bit of an increase there, 3.9%. Back in 21, we had a little bit of a decrease, but this one was really totally unexpected. I looked at New Shoreham, which is one of the smaller communities as well. They went from, I think, 200 and some odd thousand in aid to below 200,000.
Yeah.
I don't know how they could, I
Can't believe some of these communities that got ripped.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the enrollment piece is part of it. I'd really like to see those numbers, but I mean, $1 million for $4.5 million from Pawtucket. That's like, you're already stealing from Peter to pay Paul. I don't know where the funds are.
Pawtucket had a pretty big decrease, but then there was another portion of the categorical aid for English language learners.
Okay.
For example, Providence wound up with, they had a significant decrease in enrollment. They had a loss of $2.5 million in state aid. Then the categorical aid for ELL, they were getting $6.5 million. It was actually almost half of the 13 million that was allocated to ELL. So they wound up picking up 4.5 million. But when you think of that 6.5 million, that's really dedicated to ELL learners. So your base education portion is losing 2.5 million for the programs that are.
I mean, our whole county didn't get anything. We all got reduction. Everything. It's interesting.
Yeah. Some of that too, the way the funding formula works is it also uses free and reduced percentages. So in 20 and 21 and in 22, only in 20, but 20 and 21 and 22, we had universal free lunch. So you couldn't get parents to complete free and reduced applications. Even if they owed money, I was sending out letters in Lincoln saying, as long as you complete the application, I'm going to write off the balance that you had. I couldn't even get them to complete the application. So every year you would get what they call direct certs from the state. So those are the families that are on,
Snap.
they get their SNAP benefits from the state.
Okay.
And they automatically get free lunch, so they don't have to do an application. So a lot of the districts would certainly have those, and then you just really have to work hard to try to get the additional applications to come in, but it was real struggle. And I know in Lincoln, that was part of our reduction, is that we may have had close to 800 free and reduced. And, we struggled to get above 700 in the past year too. Here, that's probably a little bit of an impact, but not as significant as some of the other districts. So that clearly had an impact on it.
John, I had a question. So part of our financial aid for the state, is based on our enrollment. At what point do they look at our enrollment to take that into consideration? At what point? Is it the beginning of this year? Was it the beginning, or was it the end of last year?
Yes.
How does that?
So what they do is they take two snapshots on enrollment. They do one on October 1st that we have to get into RIDE. And they use that as the basis for the formula computation. Then they do another one in March, middle of March, that we have to send in. And then that one will adjust the amounts that were put in October.
So we got a little bit of growth.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. About 10 kiddos.
So you'll see that, you'll see a little bit of an increase in there. But in our case, we're probably getting maybe a little more than 1,000, 1,200 per student, where other districts might be getting 4,000 or 5,000 per student. So they'll have a little bit more of an impact. And then what they did, and this was interesting because RIDE came out with a different computation. Like 2 days before the governor had presented his budget, which was the same day I was presenting the Lincoln budget. So I used the more optimistic budget to the school committee, and I had to go back to them 2 weeks later and said, instead of $1.3 million, we're losing 200,000. So I had to scramble to find $1.5 million in the budget. But what they did was they changed the state share, and they increased the state share by 3% overall, which now gave a lot of communities increases. But the governor didn't want to do that. He didn't want to tweak the formula at all. So he left it the way it was. And this is really the impact from the pandemic that's impacting a lot of these communities. So hopefully we could see some change in the legislature finally when they approve the budget. But at this point in time, this is what the governor's proposed budget is for state aid.
John, if I may, that we get a little over $1,000 per student. Other districts get 4,000 or more per student. And so that metric also incorporates a community's ability to pay.
Yeah, there's a wealth formula that is put in. So the share that the state provides versus what the town provides is also based on this wealth formula.
Not going to get any benefit there.
No, I mean, that's nuts. I mean, the amount of people that we have that are elderly in this town, and what are you gonna go just based on land values? Is that what they're doing it on?
That's what they do.
That's what they do.
Yeah, Michael, it's
That's
basically
on the bottom of that list for
the ability for the district to raise money to cover it. So you have a tax base that certainly can accommodate any increases. The formula certainly wasn't perfect. They put this back in 2012. A number of districts, I know I was in North Province at the time, we got increases over a 7-year period, which were pretty significant. And those districts that got decreases, such as Portsmouth, that was spread out over a 10-year period. So back in 2021, they were all caught up at that point. Of course, then the pandemic happens. They kind of froze the formula and
Right.
provided, try to keep everybody on a level playing field. And now they're bringing it home because they were afraid if they waited another year, it would be even more dramatic.
Right.
So, but we're hoping that there could be some changes. I mean, the Superintendent's Association has lobbyists there and they've got legislators that are looking at that. I've got individual from RIDE on my board in Lincoln, and they've already made inroads with the legislators. So I know some of the East Bay groups are getting together, like Middletown and Tiverton that had losses. So they're going to go to the legislatures
They took big hits.
and try to get them to tweak it. And the other thing is that when you look at the additional 56 million, when I saw that number, I said, gee, we can't lose money.
Correct.
But then you see 22 million of it going to charter schools.
So are we not getting in on that to find out how we can get more out of it and be the squeaky wheel out of this deal? Because
We're gonna squeak.
Oh, yeah, those,
Gotta call Michelle and
the districts are all, and the Superintendent's Association is going after.
They're pretty active.
to use the idea and the analogy that because land values go up, that means you can afford it. When you have an elderly population that lives in this town, that is the worst scenario that you could base
correct.
something on.
That's the formula, Mike.
No, I understand you're in a tight spot, but you're gonna have your conversation with Ride. I mean,
That's the piece of the formula that needs to be accounted, like Michael's saying. I get the formula. But when you account that we have an aging population,
And it's,
that's something,
and it's not RIDE.
or whoever, yeah, state, whatever.
It's when they did the state education formula and they adopted it. What they wanted to do was tweak that, but the governor didn't want to deal with tweaking the education formula this year. So he said, let the chips fall where it may. I'm going to add 56 million. And that's what, when you looked at his speech, he said, I'm adding 56 million to education. Oh, that's great.
yeah, so he looks like a hero and we lose money.
Exactly. And Cumberland, which is his hometown, got $2 million almost.
Mhm.
Not saying anything.
No, I know. I
Anything.
gotta tell you, I can get my head around the Cumberland Barrington thing. I just can't. I mean, did they grow like did they grow? I don't understand.
I'll see the business manager on Friday. I'll ask him what the deal was.
Ask him what kind of donuts he brings to the, I mean, holy cow.
And if I may say, the $85,000 hit, and it may change, it may be less than that, just like last year, we got more than we were told, and they were working on some old numbers too. But I wanted to be one, if not one of the first rural and or suburban districts to move forward with free lunch for all kids. Universally free lunch and breakfast for all of our students regardless. And that was my absolute promise to myself as administrator, seeing the impact that universal free lunch had on this school. Every student could have a breakfast, a lunch, have choices, and no family was billed. You don't have to worry about your declining balance, as you all know, online. And I had to remove that once that $85,000 cut came in. There may be ways to, sort of capture that money, with staffing changes and breakage and so forth. But I can't fold it in at this point. But I would like you have to vote.
No, it's understandable.
Free lunch and breakfast for
And there,
100% of our students.
and there are
every day.
districts like Providence and Woonsocket that have universal free lunch, because once you go over a certain percentage, then it's applicable to everybody. So,
It's just the right thing to do for families.
so we're gonna continue to look at that, but at this point in time, what we do have in the budget is the governor's proposed budget. So there's gonna be a number of months that they're gonna be talking about that, and we really won't find out until May, sometimes the beginning of June, what the actual number is gonna wind up being. So, which is certainly after the financial town meeting and most of the time after any of the bodies finally approved the budget. The next slide is This is an important slide because we're looking at what, in this year's budget, we're looking at increasing the town appropriation to 7,836,947, which is an increase of 198,491. And that's a 2.6% increase over the prior year. So under the state statute, school committees cannot propose a budget that would increase the town contribution to the schools by more than 4%. That's why that percentage is very important. And under the existing laws, town can't increase their tax rate by more than 4% without having going back to the Department of Revenue and justifying that. So you can justify that, and I think we did that in Little Compton when we put the school bond on the books. So if you have, for example, a big impact on the budget, such as a new bond, you can go back to the Department of Revenue and say, yeah, I got to go up 5% in order for me to cover the debt service on the bond. And they generally will approve it, but for the most part, unless you don't have an unusual issue, you're going to be limited to the 4% on the town side, and there's a statute in there for school committees that can't increase the budget by more than 4%. In Lincoln, that's what I ran up against. I got no state aid, and I had a budget that was increasing, so I could only limit it to a 4% increase in what the town had given me from the year before. The next slide is the overall expenses. So these are what we have budgeted for expenditures. And you can see that we've increased the expenses by 2.9%. So that includes, and as Lori indicated, there's a lot of contractual agreements here. So your salaries are all contractual for the most part. So your teachers are going up by 2%. Non-certified are going up by 1.75. While the administrators are included in that numbers too. So you'll have those salary increases in there. And of course, anytime you have increases in salaries, you'll have increases in fringe benefits, whether it's pension, payroll taxes. And of course, included in that is, for example, busing. Busing goes up by 3%. That's another big number. You'll have certainly the Portsmouth High School tuition increases. And this year we're looking at about $62,000 increase. So that all figures in that 2.9. And when you look at it, we've been over the last 5 years, range from that 2 to 4%. I think this number is pretty good at 2.9%. We've kind of held the line on a lot of things. There's not a lot of areas where you have discretionary spending for the most part in this budget. There really isn't. So, I think our goal was to try to keep it under the 3%, which, we're at now. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the other areas in the budget where are really allowing us to keep it under the 3%. So on the revenue side, we talked about the $87,000 reduction in state aid. We have 9 students out of district at 6,000, so it's 54,000 in revenue compared to this year where we had budgeted 48,000. The increase in the town appropriation of 198,491. And this is an anticipated distribution for the Newport County Regional SEP. So we have the FY22 audit hasn't been completed for the Newport County. So once that's completed, there's probably a surplus in there that we think is going to be somewhere around 38,000 that will get distributed back to us. Also with the dissolution, we think there'll be some distribution of fund balance in for 23 as well. And we'll use that in our budget. And there's also, they set aside, I think about $250,000 in post-employment benefit liability. And we generally get about 5% of that number back. So we get another 12 or so. So I'm anticipating about 100,000 that we'll be able to use to offset the expenses in the FY24 budget. And that's why I said that has a positive impact on the revenue side. We'll talk a little bit about the expense side as we go forward. On the salaries and wages, we talked about the bargaining union contracts, 2% for teachers, 1.75 for non-certified. You don't know where these numbers are going to go going forward because, you know, all these were before the inflation period that we're in. I haven't really heard about contracts being settled now, but you know, that 2% was kind of something that the state was kind of focused in on, but who knows what's going to happen with those numbers as we go forward. We are looking at some increases in the teacher subs and their daily rates and the TA sub daily rates. And those have been all factored in the budget. And we also have some teacher coverage pay that we have in there figured into the salaries and wages as well too. On the fringe benefit side, if you recall last year, we had percentage increases probably similar to this. And at the end of the day, we had a much smaller increase in healthcare and probably a decrease in dental. But I did talk to the town and they're using similar percentages for increases in the current year. So that number could change, but we don't usually get that number until sometime in mid-April. So at that point in time, you know, the budget board has approved the budget. It's ready to go to the financial town meeting. If there's some reduction in those percentages, we'll see a little bit of a surplus. And we actually can see that in today's, I'll show that in today's financial statement presentation. We do have a little bit of a savings in that area. Our co-shares are still at the 20% for teachers, 18 for non-certified. And the teacher's pension, which was 15.04 last year, is 15.03 this year in 24. Not a big change, but probably not even worth noting, but that's what it is. And then like I indicate, payroll taxes and defined contribution expense will increase as a result of increases in salary. You should note though, on your non-certified pension, which the town has, they don't charge the school department for the contributions to the pension plan. They never have. So that number is not included in the budget. Something they're aware of. It hasn't been brought up, but I think that you as a committee should be aware that that expense is not in here. It's being funded through the town. So it's in their budget.
This very,
It's in their budget.
It's in their budget.
always has been a very small cohort of non-certified.
And we can probably see that number in their budget. We can actually get an idea what that number would be in their budget. But I think that you as a group really need to know that. So on tuitions, we have Portsmouth High School, which is 82 students at the $15,000. So if you look at the budget book on page
Be in your packet.
Is it the same as the file?
Yeah, it was
All right.
executive content. It's a draft, so it's not quite for public consumption.
So on page 21, we're looking at $1,249,000 overall tuition for Portsmouth High School, which includes the library after-school program, about $62,000 higher than last year. Special education, we can't talk in numbers because of the size, so we're anticipating out-of-district tuitions to be about 113,000. That can change dramatically depending on what's going on, but we do have in this budget $113,000 for those tuitions. On the CTE, we have 4 students at Newport Career and Tech and 1 student at the CTE program. Well, we have 2 there in Tiverton this year. 1's graduating, so we'll have 1 next year. Their tuition is $15,000 this year, so I bumped it up to $15,500. So we're looking at $77,500 in terms of tuition for vocational education. Now, if these students don't go there, they go to the high school, you're going to be paying $15,000 in tuition anyway. So that was when I talk in the budget, I talk about FY23. I say we have 11 less students, but we had 3 more in the vocational and tech. That means we only had the delta of 8 students when you're looking at the Portsmouth High School. Because they did go in to voc ed's training at other districts, which are similar in terms of the tuition costs.
You will also provide all that transportation.
So now we're struggling. Last year, we had 3, the budget for Newport County Regional was $315,000 that was allocated. This is over and above the special education instructors that we have on our payroll.
Correct.
So that $315,000 was funded through 2 federal grants, IDA grants for 92.2, which gave the impact on the general fund, which is the budget we're talking about, of $219,000. So discussions that we've been having with the superintendent in terms of what it might look like if we bring that back in district. We feel as though that we would have sufficient funding by leaving the placeholder in there of 219. It'll be 315 overall because we have the grant funding. But we believe we've got enough of a placeholder in there that once everything is finalized, depending on which way we go, we would have enough to continue that program. I don't know if you want to mention anything else, but.
Right, this has been a real compressed timeline, that's for sure. And I think now that we've all had time to decompress a bit and do the numbers and suss things out with Sarah Krager, Mary Serber, Director and Assistant Director, and also their business end and our business manager. Pretty certain that we will land in the black rather than in the red, and improve a lot of processes, response times that came up. Travis, you were there at the open forum, and Mike. Parents did offer effusive praise of special ed services here, overwhelmingly so, but their one sticking point was response times. Because it was, located in Alphont at Middletown, and some of those specialists were servicing 3 districts. And so bringing all of those services back home and leveraging existing staff, bringing in a part-time director. We have someone that we will be interviewing, real good prospect.
So
we're going to land on our feet beautifully.
yeah, so we're keeping the expense the same. And again, we had the $100,000 that we were getting in revenue to offset. So that's been a very positive impact on the budget.
Come back.
We may or may not have any additional savings here, but we think we've got sufficient funds anyway at this point.
So I guess my question would be federal grant funding. Is that a fixed rate that we will?
Yeah, so we get, even now, this is what we received. We were using that to offset the tuition that we paid to the collaborative. So in lieu of paying that tuition, we now have those programs in-house that we use that money to fund the in-house program. So we've talked to them at the collaborative because they would prepare some of the grants for us, but it's on our consolidated resource plan with RIDE that we submit every year. So we submit that in conjunction with our Title I, our Title II, our Title IV funding, which we prepare, the administration prepares and submits to RIDE. And it will also include the IDA and preschool in that as well too. So
And Sarah and I, for my 5 years here, I do all the federal grant writing. She and I partner on IDE Part B and also IDA Part school component. And so it's an easy sort of,
so we won't lose it.
yeah, it's on our side. It's in our dashboard.
Yeah. That money comes to us. It doesn't go to the collaborative. When we submit for reimbursement, I submit to RIDE for reimbursement, and that money comes to us.
I guess my question would be, the other one would be, you mentioned 100,000 that we would get in surplus that comes to us. And I kind of look at it and I'm like, well, that's nice. That's great. 100,000, but that's a one-shot deal.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, it may offset this, but I mean, this is a big thing in my eyes as far as taking on this, going forward. So 100,000 is like dangling a carrot in front of somebody's face. I mean, yeah, whatever,
Well,
100,000, that comes and goes, you know what I mean?
but that allows us to kind of offset the reduction in state aid, basically.
Right.
So.
Should it remain?
Right.
I'm optimistic that somebody's gonna raise some hell up there and ask some questions about why some of these communities did not, like our entire county didn't get $1. We all got reduction.
Yeah.
So we're a net negative across the entire county in growth, where Barrington, I mean, they had a 20% increase in their budget conservatively. 1.7 on 8 million.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Oh, everyone's making a stink.
Yeah,
Well, good. So good. Maybe somebody shakes the governor and he allocates a little bit more to the public schools instead of the charter schools, which have been found to be, there's a little question about how he was spending money, wasn't there, at one of the charter schools?
he may not, he may not change. They may tweak the formula.
Yeah.
At least to get everybody whole, but it'll be tough for him to kind of take those communities down a little. They can take them down a little, but to take them down to a big chunk. So, but they are looking for it. They are looking at it, and hopefully they'll, do something about it, but there'll be more to be said about that. Busing, we've got, I think we're in, year 3 of the 5-year contract, 3% increases, really no changes in the overall busing in terms of number of buses. And so that number is pretty much locked in. The next slide, Jen. Stay with me, everybody. So this slide here, what you'll see here is focusing on the electricity, where we have a $90,000 budget. And we're going down to 68.4. If you look at your packet, again, on page,
This is the project.
let's see,
The gap a bit.
page 28, no, please.
I can talk across.
So on page 28, I calculated the virtual net metering. So the arrangement is that project that we entered into, which is in Warren, will generate enough kilowatt hours on 90% of our kilowatt usage. So what it does is it gives us credits on our account for about 90% of our overall kilowatt usage. So we get full 100% credit on that, and then we have to pay the developer 65%. So that gives us our net 35%. So that reduction is a savings estimated to be approximately 22.6. So I figured our energy costs would be somewhere around 91. We'll have 22.6 savings for 68.4. This could get even more complicated because the town has gone out for a bid on solar and to put solar on. The issue with doing that is that we can only offset the number of kilowatt hours that we have. So if we have, in this case, we run around 375,000 kilowatt hours. If we offset 90% of that, it leaves us 10%, 37, let's say 37,000, 37.5. If the solar generates 100,000 in credit, 100,000 kilowatt hours in credit, we're going to have credit sitting there we can't use. A couple of ways that we can address that. We can allocate some of our credits to the town and let them make up the additional 10% that they didn't fund because they all funded 90%. And in some cases, the town hall may increase their usage because they're doing some things with the electric over there that may increase it. Or we enter into an agreement where we sublease the energy or the PV system on the roof to an outside contractor who then owns the unit and pays us rent. So they call that before the meter. So we then wind up getting a lease payment, which we can use to then offset our electricity and not be hung up with these credits. And then we don't have any maintenance or anything else on the solar system that's on the roof. That's the responsibility of the developer. So those bids are coming in. I believe they're opening them tomorrow. We've got a meeting next week on Wednesday, fire marshal and a number of other people who are going to look at those things. And we'll be able to give you a little bit more of an input at this point in time. But the reason we did do virtual, because we didn't want to have the headache of maintaining a solar system, a PV system, and and having the maintenance and everything else that's associated with it. So there may be a way around it. Now, if we would own it, I can get housing aid for that. So I can get a 40 to a 45% discount on that through housing aid with the state. But then we would end up owning it. And we're going to be in a situation where if we generate more credits than we could use, we just hung up with additional credits.
You can't redistribute the credits to the community.
We can't.
Like a solar array that powered the school, powered the community center, and then when there was leftover, it went to the residents.
The virtual we can.
Okay.
The virtual we can, but anything that's generated from that meter,
Yes.
which is our meter, we can't. So
They always got you. So, I mean, I just put it on my house, man. I'm with you with the,
yeah. So
it's a dance.
no,
It's a dance.
I mean,
I like to just say, set it and forget it. It ain't that easy.
if we can structure it and get the before the meter lease payment, I think that might be,
It's worth looking at.
yeah, absolutely.
So we're financing all the replacement of all these lights. Where does that come into the budget and this electricity?
That's included in that number. Yeah, I think we have maybe a couple more years on that one.
Every single light in this building and outdoors was upgraded.
No, there have been some savings, obviously, from that. And that basically based on the engineers, that would be offsetting the cost That's why we include it. We keep it into the electric account, so.
Potentially our electricity number would be less once that's paid off with this net metering and
Oh,
virtual metering, I'm sorry.
right, because it's all based on kilowatt hours.
Mm.
So, and I detailed out the kilowatt hour usage over the last 3 years in your analysis there, so. The other thing is, if you go back to that other slide, John, was the cost of oil. So I think I used about $4 a gallon. Who knows where it's going to be? We generally will run around 15,000 gallons. This year, we might have a little bit less because it's been a pretty mild winter. The cost was a little bit higher than it was certainly last year. I think we were in the 2 and change, and now we're, above 4. So that, who knows where that goes? The cost of oil goes down, we could have a little bit of a savings there, but at this point, that's really the base of where we're at with the oil cost. On the, pretty much on the curriculum, we're pretty much even. We're up about 11,000 on that. Some of the increase on the textbook side would be for some curriculum changes that we've got in place and hopefully to fund. So I don't think there's anything surprising in there. There's nothing unusual in that number. The next slide, and I'll have John go through his technology budget, because he not only budgets most of the capital, but he has a lot of the technology that's been integrated in the curriculum, and you've got a copy of that in your handout as well too. So if you want to briefly touch on that, and then you can talk a little bit about the capital technology. Yeah, just about the technology that you use there. So I don't know if you have.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so actually, do you have a copy of that?
I do have that.
Mine, I get surprised. Okay, you can go through that one. So there weren't actually too many changes to the line by line budget.
That's on page, what is it?
We're on page 26 here. We eliminated a couple supplemental instructional programs that we no longer use very frequently across different grades. They weren't utilized or found to be as effective, and replaced those with a couple others that were more effective, more in demand. That ended up pretty even. Technology and PD training, I think we're keeping the same. Most of our other technical services are the same. We were hoping to go for an upgrade to our SIS, but I noticed that's zeroed out here, so I guess we're not doing it.
I blanked that one out.
We're gonna put that off for a year, maybe. Other than that, those services kind of form the core of all of our databases, our management systems, our workflow automation, board docs, lobby guard, the security terminal out front. Those services are all included in here. Device repairs, we usually have pretty low actual repair costs. What we do take for damage is minimal, and often gets stripped for parts to repair other things in the school. So 2,000 is about where we've been hitting on the average year. Technology related supplies, these are the consumable things that you go through every year. ID badges, asset tags for computers, all that kind of stuff that you print once or you use once and then need to replace. We budgeted for some additional security and alarm upgrades, additional capacity to monitor doors, keep an eye on what's going on remotely throughout the building, receive alerts when doors have been propped open. Also receive alerts if a child exits the building without an adult accompanying them, just to make sure everybody's safe and sound. We're also looking at security keys for all staff. To access certain secure documents, you would actually both have to have a password, a set of credentials, and a physical token in the future to make sure that nobody outside of the building has access to any sensitive records or anything like that.
Just as an aside on that, the RIDE did allow each district to spend up to $500,000. It's not free money, but they never allowed housing aid for equipment, but they did a security, special security allocation to all districts. So I just remembered that when we do this next year, I can probably submit that to get housing aid in the following year, in which case we'll save somewhere in the neighborhood of 35 to 40% off that cost there. So
Definitely.
that'll help out.
And some of these other expenses might also tie in with that. We're always looking to upgrade to the latest and greatest just to make sure we have redundancy and failover on our network in case things do go wrong. We're looking at adding a little bit more battery backup capacity to some of the auxiliary closets. That will bring the school up to about 6 hours of available capacity. These are the systems that power the PAs, the phones, the internet in and out of the building. So at least in the event of a total power outage and a generator failure, communications would still work throughout the building. We would still have emergency services operable for up to an entire school day if necessary. Hardware, we've been cycling out Chromebooks kind of on a steady pace, retiring the older, more used ones and infusing newer ones into the inventory as time goes on. A lot of that gets offset by the REAP grant, which I think is on the next slide as well.
Yep.
Looking at making some upgrades to, there it is, to the Windows devices around the building. We still have some older terminals, some of the admin machines, the ones the front office are working on, terminals in the library, that sort of thing. Replace the really aging fleet that hasn't been looked at since pre-COVID, where we focus more on the student and the teacher devices. Looking at some classroom upgrades, most notably, we're testing devices to make the Promethean boards do exactly everything they do right now, where you can walk up to them, touch them, interact with them, draw on the screen. But you will be able to do that completely wirelessly if everything goes well. By the end of that project, you can stand anywhere in your room, have your Chromebook across on the other side of the room, totally untethered, and be interacting with it in the front of your room on the board. So that will be a useful and much requested upgrade.
Is that a teacher thing that when you say that their Chromebook, you're referring?
Yeah, so primarily, yeah, the teachers. There are methods that teachers can enable, like as one-offs, enable the students to also share their screens if they want to demonstrate some work, something like that. But there is actually some security built into that, so they can't just have free run of it either. We've also been looking at a mobile charging system. It's the Chromebooks have pretty good battery life. We have spare devices, spare chargers all around the building, but every once in a while, just enough kids in the same room forget to charge their Chromebook overnight. That we're looking into an upgrade that would allow them some portable power packs that can be distributed, whether in areas around the building, the library, something like that. And we're also looking at some technology upgrades in here. And then pretty much all the rest of that is technology software. I would say much like the other technical services is the backbone of the school infrastructure and workflow. These pieces of software are the backbone of the technology department. This is our inventory management, process management software, file auditing, antivirus, device management. We are looking, one additional cost in this area would be for an antivirus and DNS-based filter to replace our current one. The vendor is kind of sunsetting that product. And we're looking at probably Cisco Umbrella as a replacement. That's about an extra $2,000. And other than that, that's about where we are. And yeah, on this slide, you'll notice the REAP grant, we put in $13,000 that we're estimated to get for next year. And that usually goes towards funding the classroom or the student devices rather.
Yeah, I think it's a Title II called Rural Education Advancement Program, I believe. So we get that, and it's really focused on technology. So John and I will work together to make sure the wording gives them some flexibility in financing the technology. But we've been approved every year. We're on the list as well for this year, and I've got to send the application in. But that has come down a little bit, but normally get probably in the neighborhood of,
16.
yeah. And in the past, we've got over 20.
So we just got a $25,000 grant for upgrades, right? Wasn't that for the media center?
Well, yeah, I think that's what we plan on using it for.
So you have in here media center upgrades 5,000.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of different systems. We've talked about the ability to add another screen on the other side of the library so they can kind of do multiple things in the space at the same time. People have requested that on a regular basis. Upgrades to, like I said, some of the systems over on that side of the library, the check-in stations, the book scanners, those kiosks. There'll be some wiring involved in that as well. I think there's actually only one active access point serving this entire library. Really could use an extra from other electrical and data wiring.
I guess my short question is, that's $30,000 in upgrades to this media center.
Not just in technology. I mean, I think there's a number of things that would be incorporated in that. We still haven't had, I don't know if we've had like sat down with the librarian and everybody else and fleshed that out yet, but that can be used on a number of things from technology to supplies, furnishings.
Yeah, that grant, if I may, is definitely to encourage flex spaces and furnishings more than actual technology. So that's the distinction there.
That is budget in a nutshell.
So I guess my, Travis,
Go ahead, Michael, please.
my only question, I guess, would be is how do we handle, and I guess this is going to go back to Jack, but how do we handle as far as transportation for field trips for our students right now for busing?
Well, we've been going out to outside busing. We've been using Tremblay. Last year, in the past years, we used pre-pandemic with Whaling City, but apparently they must have a driver shortage, so they haven't been able to do that. But it's been a struggle. It's a struggle in every district.
Really.
Do we have a line item to cover that?
Yeah, we do have a transportation. Yeah.
How many field, because I ran into a situation where it wasn't covered. We were asking, parents were being asked for money to cover a bus
What was this for?
That was,
here.
What?
So I just like, when I hear stuff like that, I don't want to be putting burden back onto families and to parents. So
That was a mistake we made. I know which one you're talking about, the Save the Bay.
uh,
But then we came back and we said, no, the school picks up that tab.
I just want to make sure that if we need to put in an extra $3,000 or whatever it may be to help.
There's money in there for athletic and for field trips.
yeah,
A lot of districts will use fundraisers for field trips. I know that many districts will not do transportation. In some cases, for example, in Lincoln, where we have quite a few buses, we're able to negotiate with First Student to provide us X number of free buses for field trips during the day. So it can't be either morning or afternoon when they're running, but during the day when those buses are going to be idle. So we will negotiate that. But most of our, we may be able to talk to First Student to see if we can do something along those lines. But we do have money in there for the budget, so
yeah. And if I don't think it's been an
that
issue.
shouldn't be an issue.
First Student,
Yeah,
Tiverton, Little Compton, they're having difficulty just getting drivers for the
Right.
buses. They allow the same thing, during the school day, they can help us out. But after school, or if we go on a field trip beyond the course of the school day, they can't help us because the buses need to be at either Portsmouth or Tiverton High School by 1:45.
A lot of districts are having issues with athletics because they can't get the buses in early enough because they're doing their elementary runs in order to get the kids there the the high schoolers or middle schoolers to the athletic event on a timely basis, and that's a statewide issue.
I just, and I won't beat this down, but to me, outside the classroom is just as important as inside the classroom. And I just want to make sure we have the resources as far as the fund
Money's in the
to
budget,
get it out. That's,
money's in the budget.
I think that was an isolated incident, a very excited staff member. What happened was first student could not accommodate that field trip. Principal McKinnon did get some quotes that were outrageously high.
yeah, and that,
Right.
and that's okay. I didn't come to talk about that one incident. I just want to make sure going forward that we are covered so that our kids can go to field trips outside of the classroom and not put the burden back on the parents is my, that's all.
No, very good. Does anyone else have any other questions or public comment? John, thank you very much. Lori, thank you very much. Principal McKinnon, Jonathan, I know that what goes into the budget. You've done beautifully again, and just continue to keep the lines of communication open with us, certainly with the town folks, and away we go. I will consider a motion to vote and adjourn. Got a so moved. We got a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? So moved. We are out.